What started as a heated debate quickly spiraled into a full-blown meltdown. Greg Gutfeld's unfiltered response was simply too much for her to handle. The studio lights blazed overhead, casting a sharp glow on the tense scene below. The air was thick with an almost tangible electricity, crisp, crackling, and charged with anticipation. This wasn't just another night of late-night TV. Something about this moment felt different, like one of those rare instances where the conversation transcends the usual back and forth and takes on a life of its own. A moment that lingers long after the cameras stop rolling. And at the center of it all, as always, was Greg Gutfeld. Seated confidently behind his desk, his trademark smirk concealed just how much he relished the tension in the room. He had spent years perfecting his ability to dismantle arguments with a cool, calculated demeanor and a razor-sharp wit. He knew the value of timing, when to strike, when to hold back, and when to let silence do the talking. Across from him sat Rachel, a prominent liberal commentator known for her fiery takes and unwavering conviction. But tonight, something was off. The fire in her eyes flickered, dimmer than usual. She shifted in her seat, her gaze darting toward the teleprompter as if searching for solid ground. Beneath the surface, Greg sensed it, a rare moment of vulnerability. She had no idea what was coming. Greg took in the scene, the polished set, the cameras perfectly aligned, the audience holding its breath. The unspoken tension between them was almost suffocating. He had built a reputation for keeping his guests on their toes, throwing curveballs that could unravel even the most composed debaters. But tonight felt different. There was something in Rachel's eyes, hesitation, uncertainty, and Greg was ready to press the advantage. "Tonight's show," he said, leaning forward just slightly, his voice smooth and steady, "is going to be a conversation you won't want to miss. We're tackling everything from political correctness to the state of leadership in this country. And who knows, maybe we'll even break some new ground." He turned his gaze toward Rachel, the flicker of a smile playing at his lips. "But first, let me ask you this, Rachel." She straightened at the sound of her name, her lips parting, her shoulders squaring up. She was ready to play her part, to trade sharp words, thinking she could take on whatever Greg threw at her. But he had something else in mind. His question landed not as an attack, at least not yet, but as a calculated strike, a challenge aimed straight at the core of her argument. Do we really believe that silencing people with differing opinions is the way to bring about change? Or does it just silence progress? For the briefest of moments, Rachel's expression faltered. It was subtle, a flicker of hesitation, a slight tightening of her jaw. But it was there, and it was enough. She pushed back, tried to regain her footing, but Greg could tell she was already off balance. The audience leaned in, the energy in the room shifting, thickening. The debate had officially begun. "You're twisting my words, Greg," Rachel snapped, her voice edged with defiance. "What we need is a system that actually listens to the voices that have been silenced for too long. It's not about shutting people down. It's about making space for those who have never had it." Greg listened, his expression unreadable. He had heard this argument before, wrapped in different rhetoric, framed in different ways. But tonight, Rachel was on the defensive, and he could see it. The cracks in her argument, the struggle to hold her ground. He let her speak, let her gather momentum, and then, "You say it's not about silencing people," Greg interjected, his voice almost a whisper, forcing everyone to lean in. "But what happens when those voices you're protecting start deciding what others can and cannot say? Doesn't that defeat the purpose of free speech?" Rachel's face flushed. She opened her mouth but hesitated, the silence stretching just long enough for the weight of Greg's words to settle in. The audience could sense it. They weren't just watching a debate, they were witnessing a shift, a real-time unraveling. Greg leaned back, his posture effortless, his gaze steady. "If free speech only applies when you agree with it, Rachel, then it's not free speech, it's control." The reaction was immediate, a ripple through the audience, a low murmur, a moment of realization. Greg had just flipped the entire debate on its head. Rachel shifted in her seat, her fingers tightening around the edge of the desk. Every attempt she made to counter his argument only seemed to expose her vulnerabilities further. And Greg? He was enjoying every second of it. The tension in the studio reached a breaking point. Rachel inhaled sharply, her composure hanging by a thread. The confidence that once defined her arguments was slipping away. She was losing ground, and she knew it. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every micro-expression, every flicker of doubt. The audience wasn't just watching a debate anymore. They were watching a collapse. And then, just when it seemed she might recover, Greg delivered the final blow. Rachel, if you're so confident in your argument, why are you getting so worked up? Silence. Rachel blinked. The audience murmured. The weight of the moment pressed against her. She opened her mouth, then closed it. The cameras caught it all. The tightening of her jaw, the nervous twitch of her fingers, the realization that she had nothing left to say. Greg exhaled, almost sympathetically. That's the thing, he said, his voice measured. When you know your argument holds up, you don't need to shout. You don't need to panic. You don't need to storm off. Rachel sat back, crossing her arms tightly. Her frustration was boiling over, barely contained. But the moment had already slipped away. Greg had won, not just the debate, but the moment that would go viral, the clip that would spread like wildfire across social media. And then, just when no one expected it, Rachel stood up. A producer rushed over, whispering urgently. She shook her head, grabbing her notes. I'm done, she muttered, storming off set. Greg leaned back, watching her go, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. He had seen people walk off before. But this was something else. By the time the credits rolled, the internet was already on fire. Headlines exploded. The clip spread. Reactions poured in. But as Greg scrolled through the chaos that followed, he found himself wondering, had anyone actually learned anything? Or had this entire debate just become another viral spectacle? And if that was the case, was that really a win?